In the late 18th century, a bold idea took root on the American continent, a nation founded on the sovereignty of its people, not the divine right of kings. The founders envisioned a republic where citizens would govern themselves through elected representatives. They sought a government deriving its powers from the consent of the governed, a radical notion in a world of monarchies. Liberty and justice became the core principles, enshrined in the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. "We hold these truths to be self-evident that all men are created equal," Jefferson wrote, promising unalienable rights, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. These words inspired hope and movements for freedom worldwide, promising a society where individual freedoms would be protected. Yet, the colonies were diverse, with different economies and cultures, united mainly by a desire to break free from British rule. The dream of democracy was powerful, suggesting a future where merit, not birth, determined one's place. But from the start, there was debate over who counted as a citizen and how far these liberties would extend. The ideals were lofty, but their application was complex and often contradictory. Even in these hopeful days, the seeds of future conflict were present, hidden beneath revolutionary fervor. The promise of democracy drew many to the cause, but agreement on its meaning was elusive. The reality of building a nation would be shaped by imperfect hands, with all their flaws and biases. The dream was pure, but its implementation would be a struggle. The American experiment had begun, but its outcome was far from certain. The United States had to fight for its existence, enduring a long revolutionary war against Great Britain. Victory was uncertain, but perseverance and alliances led to independence and a new place on the world stage. The first government, under the Articles of Confederation, proved too weak, prompting the Constitutional Convention. The resulting constitution balanced power between states and the federal government, but deep divisions remained. As the nation expanded westward, settlers clashed with indigenous peoples, leading to broken treaties and violence. This westward movement defined early American history, shaping its character and economy, but also leaving a legacy of displacement. The young republic faced external threats and internal rebellions, including the War of 1812, which tested its unity. Debates over federal versus state power simmered, threatening the fabric of the Union. Through these trials, a sense of national identity began to emerge, distinct from Europe. Americans started to see themselves as part of a larger whole, even as they confronted the complexities of their own creation. The nation was growing and evolving, but its future remained uncertain. Expansion brought opportunity but also conflict and contradiction. The early years set the stage for the challenges to come. The dream of liberty persisted, but so did the nation's unresolved tensions. America was a work in progress, moving toward an unknown future. From the beginning, the United States was a nation of contradictions, proclaiming liberty while millions lived in bondage. Slavery was deeply entrenched in the South, its economy reliant on enslaved labor for crops like cotton and tobacco. In contrast, the North moved toward abolition, creating two distinct societies within one nation. The North became urban and industrial, while the South remained rural and agrarian, their differences growing ever wider. Enslaved people endured unimaginable hardship, yet built rich cultural traditions and found ways to resist. Their labor created vast wealth, but their humanity was denied. As the nation expanded, the question of slavery in new territories became a flashpoint. Each new state threatened the balance of power between free and slave states. Southern leaders feared federal interference. Northern abolitionists fought to prevent slavery's spread. This fundamental disagreement dominated American politics, pushing the nation toward crisis. The moral wound of slavery festered at the heart of the American experiment. The stage was set for an inevitable confrontation. For decades, leaders tried to manage the explosive issue of slavery through fragile compromises. The Missouri Compromise and later the Compromise of 1850 temporarily eased tensions but failed to resolve the core conflict. The Fugitive Slave Act enraged Northerners, making slavery's brutality a personal reality and fueling the abolitionist movement. The Kansas-Nebraska Act let settlers decide on slavery, leading to violent conflict, bleeding Kansas, and showing that compromise was breaking down. The Dred Scott decision declared African Americans had no rights as citizens, and that Congress couldn't prohibit slavery in the territories. This was a victory for the South and a devastating blow to anti-slavery forces. Political solutions were exhausted. Rhetoric grew militant and irreconcilable. The middle ground vanished as passions ran high. Each attempt at compromise only postponed the inevitable. The nation was careening toward crisis with no peaceful solution in sight. The political process was failing. The question of slavery had become existential for both sides. America stood on the brink of war. The election of Abraham Lincoln in 1860 was the final catalyst. Though Lincoln promised not to interfere with slavery where it existed, Southern leaders saw his presidency as a threat. South Carolina seceded, followed by other Southern states, forming the Confederate States of America. The North viewed secession as rebellion, the South saw it as self-preservation. The standoff erupted in April 1861 at Fort Sumter, where Confederate forces fired the first shots of the Civil War. Lincoln called for volunteers to put down the rebellion, prompting more states to join the Confederacy. The dream of a united republic had shattered. Political debates and moral arguments had given way to open warfare. Brother would fight against brother in a desperate struggle for the nation's survival. What began as a dispute over states' rights and slavery became a conflict that would consume the country for 4 bloody years. The time for words was over, the time for battle had begun. America was now at war with itself. The Civil War, from 1861 to 1865, was the deadliest conflict in American history. The industrial North faced the agrarian, slave-holding South across a vast and brutal battlefield. Early Confederate victories shocked the North, revealing the war would be long and costly. New technologies rifled muskets, ironclads, trench warfare, transformed combat, and increased casualties. Disease and hardship claimed countless lives. Nearly every family was touched by loss. In the West, Union forces under Grant secured key victories, splitting the Confederacy by capturing the Mississippi River. In the East, the Battle of Antietam was the bloodiest single day, giving Lincoln the chance to issue the Emancipation Proclamation. The war became a relentless, grinding struggle, demanding immense sacrifice from soldiers and civilians alike. The scale of suffering was immense, leaving scars that would last generations. Key campaigns and battles defined the war's course and shifted momentum. The Union's advantages in resources and manpower slowly began to tell. The conflict was no longer just about territory, it was about the nation's very soul. The fate of the Union and the future of slavery hung in the balance. In 1863, Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation transformed the war into a fight to end slavery. It allowed African Americans to join the Union Army, adding moral force and new manpower to the cause. That summer, 2 Union victories changed the war's course. At Gettysburg, Lee's Confederate army suffered a devastating defeat, marking the high-water mark of the Confederacy. Simultaneously, Grant's capture of Vicksburg gave the Union control of the Mississippi, splitting the South. These victories boosted Northern morale and crippled the Confederacy's ability to fight. The strategic initiative shifted to the Union, though hard fighting remained. Grant was given command of all Union armies, implementing relentless pressure on Confederate forces. Sherman's march to the sea destroyed Southern resources and will to fight. The Union pressed its advantage, hastening the war's end. The Confederacy was on the defensive, its defeat increasingly inevitable. The war's moral and military momentum now favored the North. The path to Union victory, though still bloody, was becoming clear. The end of slavery was now inseparable from the Union's cause. By spring 1865, the Confederacy was collapsing, its armies depleted, its economy shattered. Grant's siege of Petersburg and Sherman's march through the South signaled the end. On April 9th, Lee surrendered to Grant at Appomattox Courthouse, effectively ending the Civil War. Grant offered generous terms, allowing Confederate soldiers to return home. The Union was preserved, but at a staggering cost, over 620,000 dead and countless wounded. Days later, President Lincoln was assassinated, casting a shadow over the nation's victory. Reconstruction would begin without his leadership, making the task of healing even harder. The war settled 2 fundamental questions: the Union was indivisible, and slavery was abolished by the 13th Amendment. These were monumental achievements, but new challenges emerged. How would the formerly enslaved be integrated? What would be the status of the defeated South? The victory was won, but the peace would be hard fought. The nation was scarred, both physically and emotionally. The struggle for a more just America was far from over. The Civil War reshaped the United States, strengthening the federal government and accelerating Northern industrialization. The abolition of slavery was a moral revolution, but true equality for African Americans remained elusive. Reconstruction aimed to rebuild the South and secure civil rights, but fierce resistance and Jim Crow laws undermined these efforts. The legacy of slavery and the war still casts a long shadow over American society. Issues of race, equality, and regional identity remain potent forces in American life. The war's memory is still contested, with debates over monuments and symbols reflecting ongoing divisions. The Civil War forced Americans to confront the contradictions in their founding ideals. That struggle continues, shaping political discourse and cultural landscapes today. The war was more than battles. It forged a new American identity and tested the nation's commitment to liberty and union. While the war ended slavery and preserved the Union, it left a complex, painful legacy. Understanding this legacy is crucial to understanding America today.